Hi there. I'd like you to think about this question. How do you use your tripod? Well, if your answer is, I extend the legs, set it down, put my camera on it and start taking photos, you would be probably doing something wrong because it takes a little bit more thought than that. And in this video, I'm going to cover off some of the top things that people get wrong when using their tripods, as well as some really bad advice that's given out to people about how to use tripods. And whilst I'm out and about doing some scouting, I'll show you the right way to do things. Okay, so the first tip is about how you position the tripod legs. Now, almost everyone will do what I've done here, which is, imagine you're the subject, you put one leg facing towards the subject and two legs at the back. And that at least makes a little bit of sense, but it's not necessarily the right thing. And the reason it makes a bit of sense is because you're stood in the gap between two of the legs, and so you're less likely to knock the tripod and introduce some movement to it. But let's imagine for a minute that we've got a wind coming in this direction. So from your left to the right of the screen. And wind is one of the things that introduces most motion into the tripod. So we want to think about how to set the tripod up in such a way that it's going to counteract that wind. So if the wind's coming in this direction and it's pushing there, that's what's likely to happen. So what we want to do actually is put one leg facing towards the wind and two legs away from it. And that means you've got 2 points of contact into the ground opposing the wind, and it's much harder for the wind to push it that way because there's 2 points that are pushing against the wind. And I don't see people paying this kind of thought to where they place their tripod. I go up to the top of hills, up mountains, whatever, all the time. It can be very exposed, very windy. Similar kind of thing if you're in a big open plain, maybe you're on a beach, something like that, and there's nothing to protect you from the wind. People will just plonk their tripod down and start shooting, rather than think, which way is the wind blowing and how do I need to position my legs? So before we get on to the next tip, I just want to say I'm in a really cool place today. So I'm by the coast, but within a couple of square miles, I've got a lot of variety of different types of land. So I've got a beach, I've got some mud flats, I've got some farmland, and I've got some woodlands. So I've got a lot of options here for as I'm walking around quite a small area to get lots of nice, interesting things that I'm scouting for and hopefully might make future videos. And those swallow shots you just saw were really cool. The swallow was so tame, it let me get so close. I was down at something like 200 millimeters, it was great. But now, on to the next tip. Now, as you can probably see, I'm on a bit of an incline here, and that will happen a lot. You know, you might be on the bank of a river photographing the birds flying over it and there's a bit of a steep drop down to the river or something like that. You might be doing landscape photography and you're on a hill, part way up a hill, and taking photos there and the land isn't perfectly level. Well, there's a lot to think about when it comes to that. And one of the things that I want to talk about is leveling. So there are lots of gadgets out there. Probably the main one that most of you will have is a ball head. So I've got my camera here on a ball head. there's a knob that releases and it lets me move it in any direction around the ball. So that's fairly straightforward. There are other things like leveling plates and leveling bowls, which are really good. They let you get your camera perfectly level really quickly. But I think that people over rely on these things and don't get their tripod level. And that is really important. So let me give you an example. If somebody was coming to this hill, they might extend the tripod legs fully and the tripod is sticking out like that. And they think, oh, it's all right, I'll just level it with my ball head or my leveling base. So there we go, camera's perfectly level. But look how unstable it is. I mean, I'm on such a steep hill, if I let go of it, that's just gonna fall forwards. So you wanna make sure that your tripod is perfectly level, and almost all tripods have a little spirit bubble built into them. So you wanna get the spirit bubble smack bang in the center of the circle, and then you know that the tripod is level. And this is really important. Even if you think it's just a little bit off, it doesn't matter. It is important. I want to show you some footage from when I was photographing red grouse last year. You might have seen this video. I didn't include this bit because something went wrong. I didn't put my tripod down level, and I went off photographing the red grouse thinking that my video camera was filming me. Finished doing it, turned round, and I couldn't see my camera. I thought someone had nicked it. But look what happened. The tripod wasn't perfectly level, the wind caught it, and it tipped over. And so when I turned around, it was in the grass. Luckily, it fell backwards, landed on the back of the camera, not on the lens, and so no damage was done. But that was only a little bit off. I was just in a rush, plonked my tripod down, and the wind took it away from me. So you've got to be so careful with things like that. And the other tip for when you're on a hill, similarly to what we were talking about before with having 2 feet pointing towards the wind or in the opposite direction to where the wind's blowing, you want 2 feet down the hill. People will often put 1 foot down the hill because they always put 1 foot forward towards the subject, but that is going to be the least stable situation of all. You want 2 legs opposing gravity pulling your camera down the hill. Okay, so next I want to talk about a bit of advice that regularly gets given out. I read it in news articles, on blogs, and I see it a lot in YouTube videos, and that is about center columns. Now, people will tell you that center columns are rubbish, and I absolutely love them, and I'll show you a little bit why the center column is so important to me in a moment. But people do talk about this, and it's very out-of-date information. It's the kind of thing that just gets repeated because people have said it for years. Now, with the quality of tripods we had back in the 90s, this was probably true. But nowadays, tripods are really great. And yeah, there's some cheap ones out there, and if you get a cheap one, you're probably going to get a dodgy center column, but you're probably also going to get a dodgy ball head and dodgy legs. So that's not about the center column, that's about the quality of the tripod. If you get a decent quality tripod, the center columns are really good quality, but they aren't as stable as having no center column. So what I have done for my tripods, both of them, the one I'm using for my video and the one I'm using to shoot things today, and that is to buy one that the center column can be removed. So I can take this center column out, unscrew it, pull it out, and mount the ball head just on the tripod with no centre column. And that also allows me to get down flat to the ground, so I can spread those legs as wide as I want to and have the tripod flat on the ground. So it can act as both a tripod with and without a centre column. So now, why I find centre columns so important to me? Well, there's occasions when you just need the extra height, and if you've not got a centre column, you can't just create height out of nowhere. So that's point one. But two, particularly when I'm doing my wildlife work a lot, I find myself in situations where I could be photographing birds that are at different heights within a tree. So there might be 3 or 4 different branches I'm going for, or there could be various positions around a bush. And then what you end up doing is pointing your camera up at them or down at them. And I've talked a lot on this channel about why that's not a good idea. You always want to be at eye level. So what I tend to do is set my tripod to be a little bit lower than where I actually want it to be, roughly in the middle. And then I can use my centre column just to give me an extra few inches, or drop it back down again, or raise it even higher. But I've got those options and I can change that dead quick. If you're looking to change the height of your camera by using the tripod legs, you've got 3 sets of rings or clip locks or levers or whatever the mechanism is to change it. Here, I've just got 1 ring, move it up, snap it back into position, done, and I'm ready to take a photo again a second later than when I moved it. So having a centre column has become really important to me in the way that I photograph wildlife. Let's think this through. So if we take how stable a tripod with a centre column extended is and put it on a scale, let's say from 0 at one end, which is the equivalent of handheld, shaky, all over the place, and 10 at the other end, where you've got the absolute most rock solid steady tripod. Well, in my eyes, with the tripods that I use, I think I would put that stability at about a 9.6 or a 9.7. It's not quite 10, there is a little bit of shake in it, but nowhere near as much as people make out. So don't be worried about using your centre column. So what you can see here, I'm down on the beach and I've spread the legs as wide as they go, which gets me practically flat to the ground. And for what I'm doing now, that's great. So I've got the sand and these grasses, and then down in front of that, there's some mud flats. And we've got some wading birds that are just coming in every now and again off the mud and onto the sand. And I'm using these grasses as a bit of foreground blur and getting some really nice soft shots with the sand in the background. And in particular, there's a really beautiful little ringed plover. Its plumage is absolutely pristine, unlike the other ringed plover on the beach. And so I'm particularly waiting for that one to come back. But this is also an example of what I was talking about in the previous tip. So I've removed the centre column, and that has allowed me to get flat to the ground. And I've got an absolutely rock solid stable tripod in this situation. The only thing that's introducing any movement into this setup whatsoever is the sand. And so having a centre column really does give you the best of both worlds if you can remove it. So one other point about spreading those tripod legs is that the further you spread them, the more stable the tripod becomes. And you saw me before with those legs spread as wide as they go. I was practically flat to the ground. But when we're stood up taking photos, I noticed that I very rarely see people move their tripod legs from position 1, that I've got this in now, to anything where the tripod legs are more wide. So if you're in a very unstable situation, like it's really windy, you're on top of a mountain, if you can spread those legs further, you will get even more stability. Now, of course, what you lose is height, because the further the legs spread, the lower the tripod gets. So if you need to be shooting up here, then you're probably not going to be able to spread the legs. But if you can still find a nice composition or be able to photograph the wildlife that you're photographing from that lower down level, you'll find you get a much more stable setup. So don't be afraid to spread those legs. So another piece of really bad advice that gets told a lot about tripods is to hang your bag from them to get more stability. Now, most tripods will have a hook at the bottom of the center column, or maybe a hole for something to go through, or just under the point where the 3 legs meet. And lots of people say you should take your camera bag, hang it from it, and that gives your tripod stability. It doesn't. Not when you really need it, when that wind comes in. And what happens is that the wind will whip the bag around and it starts acting like a pendulum and swinging. And that's the last thing that you want in your photos. You don't want that motion of a pendulum hanging right underneath your camera. Now, you might say, well, I've hung my bag from it and I've never had a problem. But if you've never had a problem, chances are you didn't need to hang your bag from it in the first place. So it's a really bad idea. There are some things that you can do. So one thing that I've done in the past in really windy situations is take a guide rope from a tent and a couple of tent pegs, and I put it through that hook and push those tent pegs into the ground, and that just pulls the tripod down and keeps it absolutely anchored to the ground. If you've got a particular heavy camera bag, which you might not have, let's face it, if you're taking your camera and lenses out of it, your camera bag is going to be a lot lighter. But if you have got a really heavy camera bag with lots of other gear in it, you could put your camera bag on the ground and then tie it up to your center column or that hook just underneath it. And again, that will keep it anchored. You don't want the bag swinging. Another thing you can do is change the tripod feet. Now, you can buy different types of tripod feet and unscrew the rubber ones that come with your tripod. So one that's really good is a spike. So it's a metal spike that screws into the bottom, and that's really good for if you're on soft ground. So something like soil or mud or something like that. The spike penetrates into the mud and it keeps your tripod anchored. There are some other metal claws, so they're kind of like that and they dig in. They're really good for if you're on ice or if you're on rocks, because those metal claws will stop the tripod from slipping across the rock or ice. So have a look what's out there. There are various different ones you can get. I wouldn't recommend going for the cheap ones though. There are some where you can pick them up for a £5, and I read reviews of them and they seem to snap within no time. So, you know, if you're going to buy something like that, you may as well get the decent ones. And from what I've seen, you can tend to pick them up from somewhere between £30 and £60 for a set. Okay, so here to show you what I was talking about earlier with regard to the center column and moving it to maximize the benefit of being able to raise it up and down. What we've got here, there's a little grass bank covered in daisies, and just off over here there's a car park where people have been parking to go to the beach. And as typically happens, people throw food and waste and stuff out of their car for the birds. And so the birds are all scrapping over the food that's being left there, and they're bringing it up onto this grass bank and hiding amongst the daisies whilst they eat it. So I'm waiting for different birds to come along, there's been a variety of them, to bring some food up to that grass bank, drop it or eat it, so I don't want it in their mouth. but I'm going to get photos of them amongst the daisies and it's looking really beautiful. But I've got my tripod lower down than the top of the bank, but I don't know exactly where on that bank the birds are going to land. So this gives me the flexibility that I can just unlock it, raise the centre column a bit, and now I'm level with the top of the bank. So I can adjust my height really, really quickly and get photos of the birds at their level. Now, some questions that I get regularly asked about tripods, and one of those is why my leg's sticking. So it's all really about maintenance. So if you're in environments like mud and sand and all that stuff dries and it gets stuck up the poles that make up your tripod legs, and you need to be taking them apart and giving them a good clean every now and again. And it really depends on how often that you use your tripod. But I'm using mine regularly, so I try to give mine a clean at least once a month. And there's nothing I can tell you that really is any better than a video by Nick Page. So I'll link to that in the description. And he gives a really good overview of how to clean your tripod. And those chicken lips, as they call them, the little bits of plastic that cause the friction that keep everything together, they're the really, really important bits. But go and watch Nick's video if you want to learn a little more about how to clean a tripod. Now, another question that I get asked is, what tripod head should I be using? And that is a minefield. So I would always recommend that it's a gimbal head for wildlife photography and a ball head with a camera cage or an L bracket for woodland, landscapes, things like that. I don't use tripods for macro, but I know lots of people do, and that would be a ball head as well. But I know that there are lots of photographers, professionals, YouTubers and others that don't like gimbal heads. And I've seen people on YouTube shooting wildlife videos on ball heads with big lenses like this. So I think you've just got to try them and see what works for you. But I would really recommend give a gimbal head a go because you get such flexibility with it. I've done videos about gimbal heads before, so I'm not going to go into all the benefits of that. But there is a good video that I'll link in the description that tells you all about setting up a gimbal and why it's so important. And finally, one of the problems with using tripods is that you do get a little bit of a lack of flexibility. Now, that can be useful because it forces you to slow down a little bit and think more about your compositions. And I've certainly found that since I've been using my tripods more regularly, I hated using tripods at first, by the way, but I learned to love them. But maybe the last 7 or 8 years that I've really been using tripods heavily, I've slowed down and thought a lot more about my composition of wildlife. I've almost approached it from a landscape point of view, so there is that benefit of it. But if you want to know a little bit more about how to use something in a more flexible way, but also gives you some pretty good stability, you want to know about using a gimbal head on a monopod. And for that information, you want to watch this video here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.